Today is Thursday, the 17th of August, 2017. My name is Chris Ellis and welcome to Block Digest. This is our third episode and we are joined by Aknix Shinobi and also the great Blake Anderson to discuss mining, whatever else. Say hi, Blake. New addition to the show.
Thanks for having me on. I'm going to talk a lot about moral grandstanding, so it'll be great for everybody to pick up on my virtue signaling.
And yeah, so we're going to be covering today the controversial story, but I will say just first of all, oh my goodness, so many transactions on the blockchain right now. Let's sweep all those away. This is bit bonkers. It is block height 480,982, and today we're here to discuss the accusation and the FUD around the Bitcoin Trezor wallet. I see a lot of people like coming up in my feed and people asking about it. It's really big on Reddit right now, which is this allegation that it is possible to hack a hardware wallet, the Trezor hardware wallet. So I'm going to actually start with Trezor's response to this rather than actually reiterate all these allegations. So I think there's been a lot of fear and misunderstanding kind of spread around. And so I want to go through the debunked claims. The claim was that basically that the Trezor could be hacked, but only if one had physical access to the device. So let me just read out the debunking of the claims and then we'll go to our panelists and specialists. So first of all, it's misleading to say that the generic chip is doomed. A generic chip alongside the open source code is auditable and allows the community to participate. I'll abbreviate this. Arguably, it would take more than 15 seconds. Like literally, it would have to be this guy. You'd have to be Tom Cruise if you wanted to break into it. And flashing the firmware would take some time. Also, Trezor's case is difficult to open for the reasons described below. Trezor's plastic case is ultrasonically welded, making it difficult to open. It would be evident if it was replaced by a new case. In case of doubt, you can always scratch the case in a unique way so it's more difficult and time-consuming to replace it. It is false to state that there is a combination of vulnerabilities in both hardware and software of the device, which cannot be fixed without replacing it. We fixed the issue in 1.5.2, and there are no other outstanding issues to be fixed. And then they go into the analysis, and the link is in the description below. I will also point out that this does not affect you if you are using a password at all. So as long as you use what's known as the 25th word when you set up the Trezor, then you're absolutely safe. And I will also respond to the other piece of FUD that we got, which was that you can simply, once flashing 1.5.2, an attacker can, flash other firmware and compromise it that way over the top. You can only do that if you have a valid signature with the firmware. If you don't have a valid signature with the firmware, it erases the device. So with those explainers out of the way, I will also say that if anybody noticed, if you actually went back to the allegation on there and you actually tried to download, it would try and charge you 2 Bitcoins. So if you actually try to download the hacking software and the source code for it, it says you need to pay 2 BTC. So who wants to come in on this first? Is this FUD or a scam? Like, it looks more like a scam to me.
I mean, maybe they're. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. You can go ahead, Blake.
I was gonna say, like, maybe there's some people that have physical access to a Trezor they know has more than 2 BTC for it, and they would pay that. But I think for anybody that's not in that position to try to make money off of it, that might be, the most expensive malware you ever downloaded by paying 2 BTC. So I don't know. It's Medium. Medium is not the most trustworthy source. It's kind of a distributed publishing platform, so it's great for getting lots of content out. But I don't know. I wouldn't go around clicking a whole bunch of links, especially on this article. As far as physical access goes, I mean, I've spent a lot of time working in IT security, and physical access is always a huge issue. So in terms of what can you do to mitigate the risk of physical access, I mean, I think a lot of those things have been done by Trezor in terms of making it so that it's not easy to crack open the device and get to it. But I would say almost with any device, if you give somebody enough time with physical access to it, that you're sunk. So always beware of physical access. And then if you come from that kind of a risk management standpoint, then you should be okay. And like Chris says, if you use even better security and have the 25th word and stuff like that, I mean, then all the better.
Yeah, great. Shinobi, what's your take on it?
Well, just a little response to what Blake just said. Like that's kind of the entire rationale behind the 25th word, because ultimately, even with like a very well engineered hardware wallet like this, if the person trying to get your money is well equipped enough, they just need to pop the chip under an electron microscope, and they can literally pull the data off at the bit level. So that's literally the entire rationale behind that extra word, is you have that little bit of extra entropy to create a new address set that isn't physically stored on that chip. But as far as the entire event, I mean, I think we've kind of been noticing over the past few years like a increasing complexity and kind of willingness to just go with a chance, even if it's a bit of a moonshot with scams. And just the way this is all structured out now, where you have the claims of the hardware, like they had the 2 pins connected. They said even with a paper clip would be able to dump information out of the Trezor, even though by Trezor statements, the JTAG standard they have for actually debugging the hardware pathways is deactivated. So that kind of doesn't add up in my head. And then as well, the nature of the device wiping any firmware you flash that isn't signed by Trezor's key, that's also kind of not really adding up in my head, because how do you get firmware that could take advantage of any flaws in their debugging process on the hardware level? You would need that signature. So, I mean, just no matter which way I look at it, there's always kind of that little part where it stops adding up. And then when you look at the give me 2 Bitcoins for the exploit, like, it just reeks of a very complex scam to me.
Great. Aknix? Wait. Always difficult to go last.
Yeah, sorry. Where was I? My bad. Yeah, skip me. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
I was gonna just throw in really quick. I mean, 15 seconds. I mean, imagine getting the case off of a Trezor and getting it flashed in that pin like in 15 seconds. I mean, I'm too clumsy for, you know, even if I knew what to do to probably do that in 15 seconds.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I got one in front of me. It's gonna be a huge feat to do that in 15 seconds.
Do you think you could get it open? Could you think you could even get it open in 15 seconds?
No. Yeah, no. I mean, you're gonna have to stick a screwdriver in here, and then I just don't see it happening, really.
You tried it before, right? You said earlier that you had attempted to break
That
in.
was with my ledger, actually. So the ledger is really good. I took apart that, inspected it. I'm looking at the back of it. I start poking around with the tweezers, and I tested it and made sure it worked ahead of time. And I guess I shorted it out, and it just wiped the entire thing, just on accident. And I was like, okay, you know, I'm buying another one. That's totally worth it. They actually sent me one for free, so it was awesome of them.
That's cool.
Cool.
Do you have a lot of A+ background in hardware, or is it morely just more of a hobby?
Well, I went through that whole entire coursework, MCSE, MCSA, and all that stuff, and I actually decided not to complete it because I had such a history with not getting that certification. You know, proving that I was completely capable without that little stamp of approval. So
well, I think DIY is the way to go. But I just wanted to say, yeah. So definitely, you have more of a perspective on the hardware configuration than just a novice. Definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we should also probably talk about the qualifications of the people on here. So feel free when it's your turn to say what gives you the right to say the shit you say.
No, and I didn't mean it from that perspective. I just meant to add value, because I mean, I could tell that you were coming from a more kind of informed standpoint than a novice.
Yeah, so I worked in big data in a data center environment, so for 2+ years. So I really got a feel for, you know, the whole entire thing, you know, raised floor center, multiple air handlers, that type of deal. Petabytes of data back in, you know, 2008 and stuff.
Okay, so should we just reiterate those takeaways then from all of this confusion on Reddit and social media? That first of all, you need to have physical access to the Trezor in order to perform this alleged hack. That second of all, it is not possible to overwrite the firmware without it being signed. If so, it just wipes the device in total. Can't be done in 15 seconds. And if you have a 25th word or a password on your account, it creates enough entropy to manufacture a new HD wallet that is impossible for the hacker to find. So those are the takeaways. I hope that we've cleared up the FUD, and I hope that, you know, generally in the show, that's what we can do. Like, we can actually bring experts, you know, who can bring clarity to all the confusion online. Because as I was saying earlier in the chat room, for those of you that are joining us from the Mumble chat, hello, we were talking about the fact that there's a lot of noise right now. There's a lot of people that have come into this space that are really just interested in the drama and the tumult of things. And what we need right now is less volume and more clarity. So should we go on to our next topic? You can check the description to follow along, which is the BitPay story. So BitPay did an announcement today. Let's see if we can get this up. What Bitcoin users need to know to be ready for Segwit activation. Is this right, guys? Like, they're basically asking us to install BTC1, but then they're not really explaining, like, you know, to anyone who maybe isn't following all the in-depth, you know, news and discussion, that that's basically not Bitcoin. Like, this is the Segwit 2x proposal. So it's not even as if they're giving users a choice, right?
It feels to me a very, very like a set of instructions that are aimed at subversion of something that's going to happen, and then they're sold as this is standard operating procedure. So I think that the risk here is that users are going to be like, hey, that sounds complicated. Like, I have to do that if I want to continue to you know, operate as I have been, or, you know, clients and stuff. So I think that that made a couple people unhappy on the internet. Like, Peter Todd really took issue with the way that it went about, instead of, you know, clarifying what was going on and then, you know, verbosely describing how to do that. I think he feels like they just went into, here's what you need to do, and we're just going to call that, you know, the status quo, when I don't think that people agree that that is the status quo. So there's a lot of disagreement on that.
Yeah, that's why he's using the term dishonest, and he's saying that it's actually, you know, quite fraudulent of them to not alert users to the fact that this isn't just a, you know, like a standard update. I will go through the list.
Well, what did Shinobi have to say about it? I wanted to hear, what he had to say.
I actually, like, this is like, in my mind, this is kind of the worst case nightmare of what we could see potentially with companies in this space just wildly taking advantage of their influence. I mean, what is happening here is them effectively using their weight, using their authority and credibility as a brand and company in this space to just confuse users, to obscure the nature of what a hard fork is, of the nature of that, the bifurcation into two networks, and the informed choice people should be making. And they're simply trying to, like, shuttle them onto the side that they want without really explaining all the consequences and the implications of this. And, like, I really think, like, pardon my language, this is kind of fucked up. Like, this is exactly the opposite of what responsible companies in this space should be doing.
And I would even argue it further, that it almost seems like the language was designed to try to be, like, overly neutral and not really explain what was going on. When if it was like a piece that was going to go into a magazine, the editor would have probably said, let's use some simple language up front to try to clarify what's going on. And I think that even before, I think you're right that they should have explained more. But I think even aside from that, they could have at least laid out their intentions a little bit, which I think people felt like they not only did not do, but avoided doing.
Yeah, so we have this list of all the companies that are not, or at least haven't said whether or not they're supporting Segwit 2x, and it includes a lot of exchanges. It includes the exchange that I'm working for at the moment: Bitfinex, Kraken, Local Bitcoins, Bitstamp, Gemini, Poloniex, Bittrex. It's a lot of stakeholders right here in this list that are not supporting it, and you can find it. I think I put this in the description below. If I didn't, remind me to do that later. But this is Knob2x on GitHub. Knob2x/Knob2x, and you can see it right there. And yeah, I mean, Peter Todd's been, you know, tweeting about this all day. I mean, I noticed this from Beauty on earlier on Twitter, where he was like talking about the dishonesty factor and basically passing off, right? So in law, you have this concept of passing off, and that's essentially what Segwit 2x would be doing. It's unethical and fraudulent. BitPay's actions clearly meet the standard of passing off with clear connection between Bitcoin services and BTC1. And he highlights the, you know, goodwill owned by the trader, misrepresentation, damage to goodwill. I know we probably do have at least one lawyer watching this show right now, and no doubt we'll have some armchair lawyers to come in on it. I also wanted to point out, like, the investors in BitPay and, like, who they are. Let's pull something up here. And I think BitPay is, like, partnered with Bitmain. and this was like back in May. And I don't know if anyone wants to draw a connection there, if that's like linked or not.
Just to kind of like interject real quick, I just put the link in the box, but apparently Satoshi Labs is going to be maintaining an update of Bitcore that is compatible with the Bitcoin Core consensus rules. So there's going to be an option, I guess, for anybody whose services is dependent on Bitcore who doesn't want to upgrade to Segwit 2x.
Thank you, Bash, for that information. He also said very accurately, it's not going to deceive users into running incompatible clients. So I mean, head over to Satoshi Labs.
Great, yeah, I posted that into the chat box as well. And if anyone's on the Mumble, maybe make sure that they're aware of it, and we can like go into that more detail maybe in tomorrow's show. Is that all we want to say about BitPay? Like, I mean, this seems pretty duplicitous. We haven't actually heard anything from BitPay yet. I know Max Kaiser was an investor. I think Trace Mayer, is that right? Also an investor. And who else? Roger Ver, of course. Roger Ver is an investor. Right? So
maybe we could send them an email and socially engineer them into supporting the right things.
Yeah. And so finally, like, I suppose a lot of you might have been wondering what the title of this show was all about. But basically, I found it's like this hilarious like post on our Bitcoin earlier today, where this guy is like, my mum sent me a text saying she found this bag she picked up at a thrift store. I'm literally shaking, and on it, it has, you know, 950 BTC. But I felt like through all these comments, by far the best response to this was like the following one. Dog just found this in the garden, 21 million BTC. I mean, like, I just felt like, yeah, you find a hard drive like in the trash, or like you find one in a landfill site and it's got, you know, a certain number of Bitcoins written on it, and it doesn't actually mean that's what it has on it. But I did want to talk about the concept of literal Bitcoin mining, like physical, like actually the fact that there will be an incentive now for people to go through landfill sites and dig up old media.
Like styrofoam, people would go through landfills and they would dig up styrofoam, and you think styrofoam is valuable. Holy shit, this digital scarcity stuff is going to be a whole nother level of people being like, let me try to find this hard drive. It'll be funny. Like, I want to have a garage sale and have all my old hard drives and just write, you know, such and such BTC or LTC or whatever, and then have people be like, oh, look at all this stuff. Feels a little bit dishonest, but I did want to say that I love the instant maximal hyperbole of the 21 million on the drive in the garden. I thought that going for that maximal hyperbole right off the bat was classic.
How did he solve all those nonces 140 years in advance? That's what I want to know.
That's a smart person's drive, dude.
Yeah.
See, like, you know, there's the funny angle of it, but I mean, to get a little more serious for a second, I mean, really look at this in like the context of the historical magnitude. I mean, how many like pirate ships or old like explorer ships are at the bottom of the ocean in some vague area that people are still literally looking for? Like, you know, I really think this is eventually someday going to be the 21st century equivalent of this. Like, these people who lost these coins, their key backups, their hard drives, whatever they were on, like they talk about them. Like, those kind of circulate through the social network, and it gets to the point where, at least for some cluster of people, it is common knowledge, like what amount it was, like what it was on, like a rough.
It's like a freaking treasure map.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like things are going to get to that scale the more the price goes up. I mean, I forget his name, but that person who threw out his hard drive in Great Britain, I don't think it's too crazy to think in the next 50 years you might see the British government actually organizing and funding an attempt to dig through and find that.
This is so racist.
I mean, I have an example. I have an example too, though. You know, I sent away a hard drive for recovery. It was a head failure, head crash, right? So I send this thing out to get repaired, and basically I get in a fight with the lead tech because he's not understanding the disk layout and structure. And I'm like, you don't get LUKS encryption? That's the entire reason I sent this to you, right? Like, getting this huge fight. Basically, they want $1,200 for the hard drive to get sent back without even the data recovery done. So I'm like, okay. throw my hard drive away. Like, that's it. You know, at that point, like, screw it. I'm not, you know, it's 40 grand for $1,200, but still, I might not be able to recover it at that point. So, and basically what I was able to ascertain is that half of my Lux header was very likely completely missing. So yeah, I gave up at that point. So these types of hard drives are going to exist in the dump, you know, they'll be out there.
Eventually somebody somewhere is going to be trying to like rebuild a zero raid that had part of like, you know, a wallet that had a shit ton of money on it. And there'll be new types of science that are motivated to try to go back because of that value proposition. I mean, the implications are really, really hysterically far reaching in terms of the deflationary proposition that this medium holds.
Yeah, because I mean, there's ways to potentially decrypt that given enough time. Like, I really should have gotten a hold of that hard drive, and now I'm like kicking myself for it because I've thought of all these ways since then that I could potentially get that data off, to get that money off the hard drive.
Yeah, I mean, what particularly kind of like stood out to me in this is like the assumption that people were making that he should just go through and claim the Bitcoins for himself, like people like giving him suggestions on software ID, software that he could use to recover it, rather than just like saying like, maybe you want to give this back to the person that owned it. Like, it's just like finders keepers is just assumed in Bitcoin. It's not real money. It's just funny money. It's fine. You can take it.
It kind of comes with the territory as like a bearer asset. I mean, and that's one of the interesting things about that, because like the entire 20th century, we pretty much made a giant move away from these assets that are redeemable just by the bearers to these permission systems, these centralized like databases that you have to have access to or be given permission to access. And now all of a sudden, just bam, we're right back to a bearer asset with all of the benefits of the digital nature that's just exploding faster than anyone would have ever expected. Like it's going to really start distorting things in terms of like ownership.
Yeah, settlement finality. I mean, now it's like the transaction is done. It's not like there's all these chargebacks and stuff like that. So it is like, you know, you find it and you've got it. It's settled out. The IOU and the unit and the underlying value are fused together in Bitcoin, which galvanizes it in some cases against really, really harmful derivatives. But I think that it's funny to go back to like the shipwreck type of angle and stuff like that. Like people will go down and they'll find like an Antitheka mechanism, like old computer, and they'll be like, oh, there's no Bitcoin on this piece of shit. They'll like throw it away looking for stuff from like our era instead of like all the actual history and stuff. So I think it's funny to look at it from the idiocracy angle of like, it's going to incentivize people to look for Bitcoin and like throw away a whole bunch of history and dig through a whole bunch of history looking for Bitcoin. So I think it's funny to look at all the implications.
Great. Well, look, those were the stories for the day. I want to ask you at home what you think of the show, because this is like a new format for us, and we're still kind of hopefully going to bring to you very soon the live feed from the Mumble server, so we can actually at the end of the show or even in the show get people from the live chat room. You can also join the Mumble chat by clicking in the link at the top of the description right here. Let us know what you want to hear from. Like we've got more ideas to bring different styles of content. Weren't sure if like people wanted to hear about the price action, for example. That was one of the suggestions we had. If we do bring up price action, I want to make sure that all the caveats are in place, that we make sure this is for entertainment purposes only, and that, you know, we're not advising you to do anything in particular. But also like want to sort of keep this fairly straightforward. Like we don't want to use any like custom indicators or anything proprietary. It would probably just be a basic chart that would have like the volume, the horizontal levels, and maybe something, a simple indicator like the 200 MA. So let me know what you want to hear more of. And remember that the ethos of what we're trying to create here is inclusiveness, right? So we actually do want people like you to get involved. If you have something to say, maybe you've been on a chat room for a long time, you've been lurking on a forum, but actually you feel like you might have something to contribute. We don't mandate that people use their real names or that they have to use like an avatar or anything like that. You can come on here anonymously and still manage to have your voice heard. That's kind of what we're trying to produce. So guys, thanks very much. Like, anyone have any last thoughts before we sign out?
Yeah. What are we going to call the, we've got to come up with a name and themes with these pirate ships for these locations with lost coins. Any ideas?
Trezor Cove?
Bitcoin treasure.
Yeah. Why don't you tell us what you think the names are down in the comments below? Okay, guys. Well, thanks very much. It's been an absolute pleasure. We're going to be obviously returning to the Mumble chat. You can like and subscribe, but remember, only if you want to. See you next time. Bye-bye.